Today we will see object properties testing in functional testing. So far we have seen in system testing we have functional testing, and functional testing can involve object properties testing, error scenarios handling testing, database basic testing, links functionality testing, session and cookies related testing, and calculation related testing. So these are the different areas where we perform during the functional testing. So if you Google the definition of object properties testing, it is basically ensuring that visual elements like button, text boxes in the application have right characteristics, that is nothing but properties, and also we will verify the behavior of this object. Now the next question is, what exactly is object and what is object properties testing? So on any website or any application, each and every web element we see is basically one object. Every object can have some properties and it can have some behavior. If you take the example of button, now let's say if you take the example of button, now what are the properties of this button? So size of the button, text written on the button, what is the button label here, color of the button, these are nothing but properties of that object. These are nothing but button properties. Whether that button is clickable or not, and what are the behavior? So we can click on that button, we can double click on that button. After clicking on that button, some action will be performed. These are nothing but behavior of that object. If you take another example, let's say there can be a name input text field. So we can see some input text field for your name. Now what are the properties of this field? The size of the input field, how many character it can take, what is the placeholder here. These are nothing but properties of that input field. And what will be the behavior? So we can input the text in that special field. In that input field we can put some special characters, and it can be, there can be a validations as well. So there can be a input fields where we can only enter alphanumeric values, or we can only enter numbers in that input field. That would be the behavior specific to that object. So if you have some input field for phone number, in that situation there can be a validation that we cannot enter text in that phone number field. It can only accept only the numbers. Now that is the behavior of that input field. Similarly, if you say radio buttons, so multiple times we can see radio buttons are very common elements. So let's say whenever we want to select on and off, or let's say male and female, or any other type of selection where only one value can be selected at a time, we use the radio buttons. Now what are the properties of the radio button? Or we can say what are the properties of that radio button object? What is the size of that radio button? Whether it is selected or it is not selected, right? So these are nothing but properties of those radio button. Similarly, there can be a checkbox elements, checkbox object. So what is the behavior? Checkbox can be selected multiple times as well. Radio button is selected one at a time, but checkboxes we can select multiple checkboxes as well. So what are the sizes of those checkboxes, number of checkboxes, whether we can select all those checkboxes or not. So all these properties and behavior we have to verify during object properties testing. We can see drop downs as well. So drop down, placement of the drop down. Let's say there is a drop downs for different type of colors. So what is the placement of the drop down? How many elements are placed in that drop down? How many we can select during this drop down? Normally we can select only one element during the drop down. So those are nothing but properties as well as behavior of that drop down list. So object properties testing is a critical aspect of functional testing. In this we can verify the attributes and behavior of the user interface elements within the application. So we have to identify such objects during the testing of object properties. For example, UI elements, we have just seen the examples. For example, buttons, text fields, drop down list, checkboxes, radio buttons, etc. Now these are some basic objects or basic web elements, but apart from that there can be a dynamic web elements as well. For example, pop-ups. So whenever we perform some actions on some of the website, it can show you some pop-ups as well. There can be a modals, dynamic list. These are all dynamic web elements, or we can say dynamic objects. So we have to verify properties as well as behavior of such dynamic elements as well. There can be some custom controls as well. Custom controls are nothing but specifically designed UI components specific to the application. There can be some specific application in which some specially designed UI components can be present. And all these details we will get in requirement document. So whenever we get the requirement document along with the functional behavior, there can be a design document also presented to us. So there can be a design document which can be used by developers as well as testers for the reference. In that it is already mentioned what should be the behavior and what should be the properties of those specific web elements. And normally those documents are created by designers or product team. Once you identify such object in the functionality or inside the new feature, we have to check all the different type of properties as well as behavior during the object properties testing. So there can be a static properties like ID, name, type, value, size, color, font. These are nothing but static properties. For example, button can have some label, button can have some text written on it. There can be a type of buttons, specific values which are present, size of that web element, color of that web element, font type. All these are static properties. And some objects can also have dynamic properties as well. So dynamic means this will change during the user interaction. So let's take an example. There can be such buttons which would be disabled after one click. Or let's say there can be a text field, input text field, which could be enabled only on certain actions. Right? So these are dynamically changing objects. So their properties might change as per the user interaction, such as visibility, enabled or disabled state, position of those elements can change as well sometimes. So these are dynamic properties. Behavior properties. So sometimes we have to also check the behavioral properties as well. So how the object reacts to the action like clicks, inputs, hovers, etc. These are nothing but checking the object properties. So if you see, sometimes while clicking on this radio button, we have to show this hand cursor icon. On hovering, we will see this specific behavior. Right, so these are on input text field. Whenever we click on it, we will see cursor placed in that input text field. Now these are all the behaviors and properties which we have to verify during object properties testing inside the functional testing. So this is one of type of functional testing, that is nothing but object properties testing. So this is one of the type of functional testing. So during functional testing, we have to verify properties and behavior of the objects. And objects are nothing but various type of UI elements within our application. There can be a different type of objects: button, text field, drop down, checkboxes, pop-ups, modals, and some custom created UI elements as well. We have to check the static properties. There can be a dynamic properties behavior, or it can be a behavioral properties as well, depending on the user interaction. That's all about the object properties testing. Thank you for watching this video.